coronavirus outbreak, which originated in the Wuhan province
Listen up.
area of China, has exposed serious dangers of our dependence on China for essential drugs, medical supplies. By the way, nobody is warned about our reliance on China, unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, reliance on manufacturing with China. We were told during the Biden-Obama years, those jobs are never coming back, and the president fought to bring back by eliminating regulation, creating tax incentives, that we'd have more manufacturing here. Here to explain all of this, investigative reporter Sarah Carter. Sarah, the latest.
Well, it's certainly alarming, Sean, because China is definitely ratcheting up the rhetoric, and they're threatening in their local media and state-run media to plunge America into the sea of coronavirus. That was their latest threat this past week. Something that is alarming both national security experts and top physicians is the fact that 95% of our antibiotics are actually manufactured in China.
You know, in a way, if what they're saying is true, that should be almost looked upon like we're threatening somebody with nuclear bombs. Going to hold us hostage over this coronavirus. That is absolutely terrifying to think that China possibly is going to hold us hostage over the coronavirus. Listen to the rest of this. This is absolutely an eye-opener.
And over 40% of our pain medication. And if China threatens to withhold that medication, that could put us in a horrible predicament right now. So what they're doing is they're begging the Trump administration to make this a top priority, to look at what we can do to bring those manufacturing jobs back here and produce the antibiotics, as well as the pain medication and medical supplies in the United States.
All right, Sarah Carter, thank you. We're going to keep an eye on it. And I know the president needs information from China right now. I know there are trade deals in the works here, but China did the world no favor in any of this. They need to be held accountable. Now, the coronavirus has exposed this disturbing Chinese disinformation propaganda campaign, state-sponsored propaganda, making the wild claim that our U.S. Army is to blame for their outbreak that happened there. I don't blame the country of China for the outbreak. I blame them for the lying, the lack of transparency, misleading information.
Exactly.
And not accepting the help of world professionals that could have greatly reduced the spread of this virus. Now, that prompted the U.S. State Department to summon the Chinese ambassador for this spread of these lies and this propaganda. Yes, the virus originated in the Wuhan province area. Dr. Fauci, many other experts have made that clear. It's just a simple fact. The president was asked about it earlier today. Let's take a look.
I did read one article, but I don't think that article was representative, certainly not in my conversations with President Xi. And they know where it came from. We all know where it came from.
Here with reaction author Gordon Chang, along with Fox News contributors and former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman. Mr. Chang, let's start with you. This is just outright lying. China tried to hide it. They were not helpful in the beginning. And one person that had been warning about China more than any one individual in this country was, for years, Donald Trump. Unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and too much American reliance on the cheap labor and manufacturing outsourced to China by the United States.
Well, you're absolutely right. One of the first things that President Trump did was he had that July 21st, 2017 executive order looking at the robustness of our supply chain. That was important because it led to a number of changes, including tariffs on steel and aluminum to bring that back to the U.S. We are critically reliant on China, as Sarah Carter said, and this is unacceptable because China, first of all, has turned around shipments of masks, gowns, other medical protective equipment. They did that a couple of weeks ago. We've also seen just the threat 3 days ago to cut off the supply of antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals. This is just an unacceptable position for us to be, and the president recognized this earlier.
Mr. Chang, you have said China is our enemy. You have talked about in detail about the People's Daily, the authoritative publication, state media, carrying a peace, declaring a people's war on the United States. You mentioned the threat of holding or withholding some manufactured medicines. Now this conspiracy theory, and they did hide the information from the world, and they were less than forthcoming, and it didn't help the world. It hurt everybody.
Well, it certainly did. For 3 weeks in December and 3 weeks in January, the top leadership knew about this or had to have known about it, didn't do anything. And clearly, while that occurred or it didn't occur, the virus spread around China, and also it escaped China to the rest of the world. That didn't have to happen, but for the secrecy of the Communist Party. And by the way, Sean, we have seen the Communist Party go back to their extraordinary control over information. They've kept virologists for as long as possible away from Wuhan. They have inhibited their search. And clearly, this right now is a problem for not only Chinese people, but for the American people and people around the world.
Let me bring in.
There has been countries that has went to war with other countries, that has declared war on other countries for less than what China is doing right now, if these accusations be true. If these accusations be true, as far as turning around ships, knowing that it had medical supplies on it, and threatening another country in regard to holding that country hostage over its medical technological advances that it's already done, made commitments to a country of making and distributing. There has been countries that has went to war over other countries less than this. You're not just talking about boycotting oil or boycotting advanced tariffs on products. That way you can fairly get a NAFTA free as well as fair trade agreement going. But you're talking about harming and hurting innocent people's lives because you know that you're manufacturing medication that's helping those people remain in the balances of life. And for a country, if this be so, I'm not saying that it is so, but if it be so, there has been countries that has went to war with other countries on less than this because of violations of a global NAFTA agreement. I don't know if any of this is so, but it's very, very alarming. And I find it to be more than just careless. It's gross negligence upon our part that we would allow for the medical industry over here to be so solent upon to another nation such as China to be able to produce such critical advancements of keeping their citizens alive, depending upon a country that could basically hold us hostage like this. I find it to be absolutely appalling. Appalling. Regardless of whose administration or what administration allowed for this to happen. All in the name of the good old American dollar bill because we could get it cheaper from over there than what we can manufacture it ourselves for. It's one thing, to kind of shoot yourself in the foot over, let's say, making 42-inch Hong Kong flat screen TVs. There's no doubt, whenever you're dealing with a communist controlled country that don't have to pay their citizens a dime, that they're going to be able to exceed and excel over the labor rate issues 1,000,000 to 1 above and beyond the rest of the world that works in exchange like we do towards paying its citizens a certain amount of money to be able to make a flat screen TV. There's no doubt that China can produce a flat screen TV and put it on a boat and send it here to the United States, truck it to wherever it needs to go. It doesn't matter if it's in Maine, Washington State, doesn't matter if it's in Brownsville, Texas, or Homestead, Florida. These items can be put on a shelf and sold cheaper than what our labor here in the United States can manufacture the same TV for. Our back is against the wall whenever it comes to competing with labor issues against communist-controlled countries, and even Mexico and South America can outdo labor force issues probably 3 to 1 in comparison to what it costs General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler to do the exact same thing here in the United States versus what they can get by with in Mexico or South America, building the same part, building the same automobile. Our backs are against the wall whenever it comes to labor issues on a global NAFTA free trade, fair trade deal. But to hold a country hostage and put people's lives in the balances pertaining to medical, that is a completely different song and dance in comparison to a 42-inch flat screen TV. And I'm just using this as an illustration because this is sounding to me like that we're dealing with some rootless human beings over there that would even remotely gesture the ideal of taking a whole shipment of medical supplies and turning them around and bringing them back to their port. There's something about just the very ideal of that is irking to me. It makes me sick to think that a communist-controlled country would even contemplate the ideal, much less actually do it. And according to what they're saying tonight, it's actually been done. As far as turning a ship around and saying, you know what, we need the medical supplies worse than y'all do. We're going to hang on to the gloves. We're going to hang on to the mask. We're going to hang on to the robes. We're going to hang on to the stuff because we need it worse than y'all do. Wow. That is reaching a proportion on the level of a country going to war with another country in the resistance on a humanitarian scale. It would be the same thing if you was threatening us with nuclear bombs. This is reaching a whole new, different plateau pertaining to China and their coronavirus outbreak that we know now probably come from their heathenistic cannibalism ways over there towards a bunch of people eating a bunch of live bats, stimulating the nerve system. I don't know if it was causing them to I hate to use the word erection or stimulate them sexually or it must have been doing something to the mind or doing something to the blood towards anybody that would want to even eat a live bat, while it was still alive. You know, it's one thing to want to eat an octopus or a squid or something that floated out of the ocean that's basically in a reptilian type form to begin with. Cold nature type deal to begin with. I don't even know why people would want to eat anything raw myself, because that fits under the rim of cannibalism, of wanting to eat something raw. That was one reason why over in the Bible days that it was so lethal of eating anything with a split hoof, like a hog or a pig, was because their cooking practices back then was so trivial and so lax that if you ate raw pork, you was substitute of not only getting worms, but you was substitute of dying. And we know over here in America, just like us having barbecues or outdoor cookers, that you put little thermometers in chicken, that the meat has to rise to a certain level before it is considered to be properly cooked, because you can get diseases off of eating raw chicken. You can get diseases off of eating raw turkey. You can get diseases off of eating raw raccoon or squirrel. You have to cook the meat properly to make sure you stay within the guidelines of the health community, saying that this is okay, this is proper. Doesn't matter if it's pig, doesn't matter if it's a hog, doesn't matter if it's a deer. You have to process the meat. You have to cook it. You have to cook out the impurities that's in the meat before you can eat the meat. You can't eat it raw. If you eat it raw, not only is it going to make you sick, but it could kill you. Literally kill you. I thought everybody in the world knowed that. Apparently they don't know that over there in some of those communist-controlled countries. That is sad in and of itself. That's like hygiene. Everybody should know that you should properly wash yourself and brush your teeth. There must be people over there in China that probably don't even know proper hygiene. It's so sad. It's almost like walking back into the dark ages with some of these countries that are eating raw, live animals, like bats, or squid, or octopus. This is a completely different level of concern whenever it comes to withholding, holding back, or using medication as a tool to hold a country hostage over its senior citizens' communities.
Ian Hoffman, your take on all this?
Well, I just think this highlights the danger of outsourcing what matters to our national security to China, whether it's high tech, and this administration has been very tough, including with our allies, about not allowing Huawei to gain traction for the 5G network for the same reason. This is China trying to whitewash their reputation overseas, as well as deal with the home front, where Chinese are legitimately concerned about how, as Gordon Chang emphasized, their government withheld information. Indications and warning about a pandemic flu are not like fine wine getting better with age. And China really risked not only the health of their own citizens, but the world as well. And they should be held accountable for that.
All right, thank you both. And over time, the president does need information from China right now that will be helpful for the safety and security of American citizens. It's not exactly the time that we need to build up an enemy here, but they need to be held accountable. Up next, all eyes on Capitol Hill. A vote could happen at this hour in the House of Representatives on a coronavirus bill. Chad Pilgrim, he'll join us next. Also, Senator Lindsey Graham live on the phone. He is self-quarantined, awaiting for the results of his coronavirus test. Straight ahead.
That is just so mind-boggling that a country would be willing to have medical supplies on a shipment. And this isn't the first time that I've heard this, on a shipment heading to America, and all of a sudden the leaders over in a communist-controlled country decide that they need the supplies worse than we do, and call the shipmasters up and have the shipmasters turn the vessel around and go back to the ports of China after it already had headed over to America, because they said that they need the gowns, or they need the gloves, or they need this worse than we do. That is just absolutely mind-boggling to me, that if these accusations are true, if they're true, there's no doubt that this is almost reaching a level, and could actually be reaching a level, of war. It's one thing to hike money up. It's one thing to make a 42-inch TV. It's one thing to beat us in labor issues of being able to turn wrenches on automobiles cheaper in one country than we can produce it here in the United States, because we got the cart in front of the horse, working on a global international scale. But it's another thing to withhold precious property pertaining to medication. I just can't believe that we have allowed for ourselves to be put into precarious, various situation like this. I can't fathom how that anybody would have been willing to have done this towards something this sensitive, something this this crucial to a nation, that would have been willing to have put all of their resources off on one particular country, such as China, in regard to making medication for their citizens. To me, that's not just careless, that's gross negligence. That's my opinion. My opinion don't cost you nothing. It's free. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us. Coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255.